welcome everybody and welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming to this session, Tyranny of Distance. What I'm going to do is briefly explain what we're going to do on the panel, and then when I ask each of you to talk a little bit also about your particular publication, because not everybody in the audience will be familiar with Rising Kashmir or Nagaland page or what it's about. But you know, the idea for this panel a lot came about because it was about writing about your home territory, as it were, for the home audience. So not just necessarily the left out parts of India, as it were, but also writing about it, not necessarily to translate it for an audience that was sitting in Delhi or somewhere else. So this panel is kind of a mix. So we have somebody like Kishalay, who might be talking about news from the Northeast, but for an audience that is nationwide, you know, watching NDTV or whatever. Or on the other hand, you might have a Nagaland page where Monalisa is based in Nagaland, writing on issues, publishing a newspaper that is pertaining to issues of interest to people in the region, you know, who want to see their issues reflected there. So it's kind of that mix about that distance from Delhi and what makes it difficult, as well as, you know, maybe there are some advantages of being away from the spotlight, as it were. So let me actually start by, maybe I'll go to you, Dhanya, and perhaps you could say a little bit about News Minute, and then I want to ask you, you know, how much does this idea of what people have, you know, you might say daily news is always Delhi news, is that changing with respect to the South, when right now it seems news from the South, whether it's, you know, what special privileges is Shashikala getting in prison, or, you know, suddenly people all know about Jallikattu, or all of these stories, has it finally broken through to Delhi and the rest of India?
So I'm Dhanya. I run the website called the News Minute. We do news stories, analysis only from the 5 southern states. We cater to our audience in the 5 southern states, but we also write stories thinking of people in Bombay and Delhi. Like, I tell my reporters to think that if you're writing a story about Bangalore, why should someone in Delhi read it? What is their incentive? So explain it to them. So we do both kinds. I worked with the national television channel, which is Times now, for 8 years. And I have really struggled at many points to convince my newsroom that this is a story which is worth taking. This is a story that should become a headline. Because a similar story, if it happened in Bombay or Delhi, would have become a headline. I mean, compared to some of the others sitting here, I'm sure South does way better.
It's gradations of privilege or lack of.
Recently, yes, there's been a lot of proliferation of news from the South Indian states. But that too, I think, is very personality-oriented. It's not really about issues. It's about, I think the national media has a fixation perhaps with Jayalalitha, Shashikala, B.S. Yedurappa, like 4 or 5 people. So any news, Rajnikant, yes, how can I forget Rajnikant? So any news to do with these personalities get covered a lot. But there's no real understanding sometimes of what's actually happening on the ground.
But what do you think changed over the, you know, from the time when you felt like, you know, the struggle of, no, it's not getting covered at all? Was there a breakthrough moment? Was there a story that broke the...
No, I don't think so. I think it's basically to do with ratings. So I'm talking about national English channels only. They've realized that their biggest audience is from Bangalore and Chennai. Sometimes it's not even New Delhi and Bombay. So what was happening at one point of time, there is a channel in Bangalore called News 9. It's an English channel which does only local news. So for example, if there's a BBMP election, Bangalore would tune into that English channel. There were points of time when that channel would get more ratings than national news channels. So I think at some point they realized that, look, the more English news watching audience is in those cities. So we have to give them local news or they're not going to watch us. I think it's a rating game which changed everything. I
mean, I do think that's probably true, because I used to work at First Post as a senior editor, and much to my snooty Bengali chagrin, I realized that, you know, Bengal, which prides itself on its anglicized thing, it didn't feature anywhere at all in our ratings game because way more people were reading first post from Bangalore and Hyderabad than they were reading it from Kolkata. So nobody gave a shit about what was happening in Kolkata. You know, you did two stories a year about Kolkata, one during Durga Puja, and one sort of the nostalgia story of Calcutta Christmas maybe. And then if a riot breaks out in Boshirat, then suddenly everybody wakes up to Bengal. So even a metropolis can suffer from tyranny of distance of sorts.
And I think the regional media is growing so much, especially I know Malayalam, Tamil, Telugu. They're so powerful in those regions that the national media just figured out a little late that you have to compete with these regional channels now.
So, Kishalay, let me turn to you and ask the sort of the flip side of what Dhanya is talking about. You are reporting about stuff that's happening in the Northeast, but for a national audience. Did you face that same kind of balancing struggle of trying to persuade somebody that this is a story that is of interest and relevance and should be covered?
You know, the time that I joined television, I've spent all my working life in television, mostly at NDTV. For 18 years I was there, initially in Delhi, and then when I moved there, times were much better because resources were much more. We could travel a lot. There was always, I think, the convincing your newsroom to sell your story is a universal newsroom dynamic. So this is not, peculiar only to India or to any particular news organization. The debate between the center and the periphery will continue to be there. And, if you take it to another level, even inside Delhi, there is a periphery and there is a center. So I operated out of an office of South Delhi. So most of our stories of Delhi were basically South Delhi and Central Delhi. We did not cover West Delhi or East Delhi. Haryana, which is almost your NCR. I mean, I don't know in the last 1 year how many stories you would have seen out of Haryana except for a Khap Panchayat or except for Gurgaon getting waterlogged. There is no story that comes. So, it wouldn't be really fair to say that only the regions are not covered and only the center is covered. Right now, for example, Assam for the last 1 month is under flood. But along with Assam, Manipur is flooded. Arunachal every year gets completely disconnected. And even the Assamese newspapers don't cover Arunachal or Nagaland or Manipur. So there is a periphery and a center out there as well. The newspapers of Upper Assam will not cover Lower Assam. The newspapers of Lower Assam will not cover Upper Assam. So that challenge is always going to be there in a newsroom situation. But like I said, that times when I covered, it was easier in the sense that there was resource and I could travel easily. There wasn't any ban on traveling. Today there's no traveling budget, so reporters can't travel. Reportage is all, it's so meager that you virtually, I think about 95% of India is not covered. And that goes true for whether it's Lakshadweep, whether it's Ladakh, whether it is the Northeast, whether it's Kashmir. For example, in Kashmir, you cover only Srinagar, you cover the valley. All of Kashmir is not even covered. If you come to now, more marketing, if you say that, well, let's discuss where the market is, then the two things that actually come up is that we have failed. And by we, I'm saying, the people in this news business, we have utterly failed across the world to devise a revenue model for news. So news does not have a revenue model. Now, if news does not have a revenue model, then you go to the market, and the market would say, well, this is how news should be done. And that is how news is being done. It's been totally corporatized. In this corporatized news, but a couple of years back, not a couple of, at least about 10 years back, one of my colleagues at NDTV, T.S. Sudhir, who is from the south and covered Hyderabad, still covers that area. Sudhir and I had done a market survey, and we found out that 60% of the India's English language viewing or reading audience comes from the south of India, and whereas the news is dominated 90% by north and has hardly anything of south. And we thought that even if we were to go by the market forces, the logic would be to have actually at least 50% of southern news and the rest could be the rest of India. The market did not want to buy that argument either. So I'm not very sure of how to go about it, but we have failed in many ways to even devise a revenue model, go to the market and say that this is the revenue model. And that's why today there is no news, there is no coverage, there is no reportage, and I don't think so things are going to improve anytime soon.
Let me turn to you, Monalisa, right now. Until the news of the Naga Accord that people started talking about. Before that, do you remember the last time that you saw a story from Nagaland getting national attention?
I don't remember any national television doing a story, proper one, on Nagaland. But then I must also confess, unless it's very urgent, very necessary, I don't watch national television. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm from the print media. So, I mean, yeah. And, you know, we've been having a lot of political turmoil in the past few weeks, since early July. And perhaps NDTV and maybe one other news channel, they just have that thing.
The ticker.
Yeah, saying that, oh, Sardesai has been, you know, this, or Mr. T.R. Zeliang has been, you know. Anyway, just to let you know that Mr. T.R. Zeliang was asked to have a floor test today to prove his majority. I just got the news. He's got it 47-11. So, yeah, I mean, nobody has done stories, you know, in detail. And even the accord, and I think you're talking about the 3rd August 2015 accord. Probably because the national television doesn't know our history. Yeah? They don't know our history, our culture, our traditions, whatever. And therefore, it's just that, what you call ticker. It's just the headlines and no details.
Tell us a little bit about the history of, like, so when you start something like the Nagaland page, are you at all concerned as to how much that is telling the true story of Nagaland for the rest of India, or are you satisfied with the Nagaland page talking about issues that are important to people in Nagaland right there?
See, ours is a very small newspaper, so primarily it caters to the local readership. But thanks to technology, people, because we have our online issue and we are on Facebook and stuff like that, so people from all over the world are reading, not just in India. And particularly in January and February, when we had those riots, you know, those anti-women, women's reservation riots, people were reading our newspapers, even from, you know, Western, Eastern countries. And we sort of managed to get, you know, we then learned that people were actually reading our papers, local papers, not only within India, but also outside. And then also, it was in 2015, or was it 16, we had that famous case with the Assam Rifles, and it was the BBC first who picked it up from our local papers. And only after BBC did a feature on us and spoke to us, and, you know, they did whatever they needed to do, that the national papers started calling us up.
So the BBC did it, and then the national papers followed.
Yeah. So while we are happy because our first, you know, our first primary, you know, target is our local people, you know, with local issues, then we discovered that local issues are important.
So what is in the, if you were to look at the Nagaland page this week, what would be the front page stories right now?
It will all be about Dr. Sardesai, T.R. Zeliang, and of course, the governor.
So let me turn to you, Shujaat. As Kishalay was mentioning, in some sense, Kashmir definitely gets a lot of coverage. I mean, it's in the news. It's not off the map in a way Nagaland might be for the rest of India. But for somebody who's, you know, living and working there, what are the challenges of the kind of coverage that it gets and how to navigate that?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think it's very pertinent to mention that once Pranab Mukherjee, as Defense Minister of India, said that let us have peace on the periphery and development in the center. So I think it speaks a lot about that how the peripheries have been treated and ignored for a long time, because peace has become more, has got more importance than the development. As far as Kashmir is concerned, I think Kashmir is completely a different kind of a case, as you rightly said, because of the political reasons, because of we get more international coverage than national coverage, because Kashmir is placed in such a kind of a situation where you do get publicity and you do get space. But as far as getting the coverage to the issues which are existing in Kashmir, in the national media are concerned, I think the dynamic has completely changed, essentially in the past 5, 6, 7, 10 years after this news channel invasion has come. And the narrative is completely being changed in such a way that as if nothing is being done in Kashmir, which is worth covering, in the sense that you won't devote the time at the prime time television to the killing of 8 civilians on the election day, but you would give most of the time to the valor of, Major Gogoi, for that matter. So that's how the narrative is. And I think, though you have 1 hour flight from Srinagar to Delhi, but distance is so long. I worked in the Hindu for 15 years as bureau chief in Jammu and Kashmir. Print was still better. You would still get space and you will still get attention as far as Kashmir happenings are concerned. But today, I wouldn't say that it's only because of Kashmir, but the fundamentals of journalism seem to have been changed completely, because you are forced to say that you have to be a nationalist first, then you can be a journalist. If you have to be a journalist, you have to be a journalist. So obviously, I think the narrative which is being parroted vis-a-vis Kashmir in the national media today is completely out of sync with the realities on the ground. And once I, as a journalist, who I am an editor of a newspaper now, there are a lot of challenges. You're talking about the distances, that how long the distance is from the national landscape to the ground, wherever you are, in Nagaland, in Kashmir and all that. But how many people in this room know that for weeks together you don't have internet in Kashmir? How can you bridge that gap, and how can you shorten the distances? And how many of the people in this room know that last year the newspapers were banned for at least 10 days in Kashmir? So how many of the people in this room know that the cable news in Kashmir is banned in Kashmir and not in Jammu, for that matter? So there are so many realities. I think, as Kishalay was saying rightly, that even we don't cater to the areas outside Srinagar sometimes. So I think the realities on the ground are so different from what they are being projected, because there is an incident like lynching of Ayub Pandit. That would get more coverage in the national media than a civilian being killed in an unprovoked firing incident from army or the police, for that matter. How many of the newspapers in Delhi, or the channels for that matter, are talking about the real human rights violations or the fake encounters, for which Kishalay has done a great job by writing the book, for that matter? So I think, I'm not saying that it is all, it's all bias, for that matter, but the narrative, the distances are being created. That is the problem. The distances which ought to be removed as a matter of doing journalism, as a matter of doing real journalism, those distances are being, created more, and there is more there is no interface. And you're talking about mainstreaming, you're talking about integration and all other things. Those things don't exist, because once you have taken a stand that everybody is to be demonized, I'm talking in the context of Kashmir, for that matter, that every Kashmiri is a terrorist, so whosoever gets killed in army or police firing, you have a foregone conclusion that he had to die in the firing, and that was the ultimate thing. So when you have this kind of a notion, and you go with your journalism with this notion, how can you remove the distances? How can you bring people back to the mainstream for that matter?
So let me stop you there. When you say that, Shujaat, does that put a reverse pressure on you? Like if you're combating against this larger narrative that's being created, are you also then, as a journalist, facing the reverse pressure from people there to actually become almost an activist or an advocate and be on their side as opposed to being objective?
No, I mean, yes, pressure is always there because in a conflict situation, I mean, you always work on a razor's edge. I mean, nobody can claim to be the complete, independent journalist and all that. But in spite of that fact, I would say that, yes, the people in Kashmir, the journalists in Kashmir have done a great job by actually not crossing the red line the way we see that people crossing the red lines here. I think you can see that the way people who are based in Srinagar, I said that I worked for the Hindu for 15 years. I mean, I never crossed that red line. I mean, my work in the Hindu archives would watch for me that how I have worked as a journalist on the ground. I have not taken sides, or for that matter, whosoever who works for Indian Express, Hindustan Times, or for that matter. But I'm saying you're right, absolutely right, that once a provocative scene is created, so obviously the pressure is on you to act in such a way that the entire responsibility comes on you to tell that side of the truth. So obviously, I mean, there are more pressures for the local newspapers than the national newspapers because you are in a conflict situation.
Well, since piggybacking on this idea of pressures, let me ask you, Dhanya, you have like the entire region in the south that you're doing, and you talked about this where you're asking your writers why should a person in Bombay care about this story or not? How do you deal with this pressure? So you're getting coverage, but what kind of coverage? Are they getting the real story, or are they just obsessed with what Rajnikant? How frustrating is that for you?
It can be very frustrating. I mean, I've been through the phase where it never makes to the news. Now I'm in the phase where I wish it didn't make to the news. I can give you 2 or 3 examples quickly. For example, there is a debate going on in Karnataka about having Hindi on the metro board signs. Most of you must have seen it on television. There is a recent controversy about Karnataka having a separate flag. I mean, Karnataka has had that flag for 30 odd years, but they want to make it official. So I was watching a national television the other day, and the anchor asked a Kannada activist, how can you be anti-national? How can you be against Hindi? So the narrative is already formed, that the whole point is, the agitation is not against Hindi, it is against the imposition of Hindi. That is not being understood when television channels debated. So you have lost the debate when you started itself.
The frame has been against you.
The second thing, from Kerala, for example, there are a lot of stories about killings, political killings in Kannur. For example, any story we write, people will come and ask us, but you're not reporting about Hindus being killed in Kannur. There are no Hindus being killed in Kannur. There are CPM activists being killed. There are RSS guys being killed. And it's not like there are hundreds of people dying. I think there's just been 2 or 3 this year, which is pretty miraculous. The third story, Rajnikant, I was telling you that. There is every Saturday, Sunday, if you look at English news channels, you will see a Rajnikant story. Because Saturday, Sunday, less newsy day, just bring Rajnikant. Please put on television tomorrow, there will be some Rajnikant stories entering politics, or he sneezed, or he walked. But when we do a Rajnikant story, we get so badly trolled. People asking us, by our readers saying, why are you behaving like the national media and covering Rajnikant? We don't care about him. So we stopped doing Rajnikant stories after a point of time. We were doing lives outside Rajnikant Fan Association meeting. And my reporter was taken aback because she's looking at the Facebook Live and people are like, Priyanka, go home. Don't you have any other work? Because our audience is primarily from South India. And they're like, we don't care. They may vote for him, I don't know. But they just don't want to be fed with stories about Rajnikant.
Someone is going to tweet from here. Dhanya Rajendran said, we do not cover Rajnikant at all. And now you're going to get trolled again by
we have actually reduced stories on Rajnikant a lot because we realized that then we are behaving like a Times Now, a Republic, or anyone else, because they believe that Rajnikant should be covered. I mean, I did go through that phase 1 or 2 months ago when I was like, yeah, do all Rajnikant stories. And I thought, why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. So I do report news, but I don't go overboard.
Kishalay, in that term, like this balance that Dhanya is talking about, like, Rajnikant is big news, but how much Rajnikant is too much Rajnikant? That balancing act that you have to decide. From your experience, how do you find this happy medium? You're covering things that must be covered, but at the same time, like how do you decide that this is too much now, stop, enough already?
See, by designation, I was a resident editor, but that was because when you move up, you kind of given certain decisions. But I was a reporter on ground, really, so I didn't have to suffer decision-making of which is going to be news and which is not going to be news. But if I were to take that call, that's always a discretion, that the editor, and I'll come to this in a few seconds. If I just go back a little to say that, from when you say of tyranny of distance, rather than tyranny of distance, which was actually, I think, a book by an Australian writer, and Rajdeep keeps quoting that because
Which he shouldn't.
Yeah, which he shouldn't. Forever, Rajdeep's, excuse for not covering the regions is that there's tyranny of distance.
He is an editor, why didn't he change it?
But I would rather replace distance by saying tyranny of the center. So I think tyranny of the center is far more, powerful and more relevant than saying tyranny of distance. Yes, tyranny of distance, because logistically, particularly for a broadcast person, it becomes extremely impossible to cover every part. So I was covering 12 states. Now, even if I had a drone or I had a helicopter, chopper, where can I cover 12 states? So resources, we are not a state-run media. Your resources are always going to be, we are not a BBC either. Right. So we have to look at resources and then prioritize. So your answer to this is, you prioritize news. Now, what happened is that for a very long time, the areas that I covered, which later we started calling conflict zone because it sounded sexier, as opposed to covering North Block and South Block, because no one was paying attention to us, and so we gave ourselves that little badge of honor. I realized that while I was trying to push the stories, and the nature of the beast is such that obviously if you're in a place where a bomb is going off, you cover the bomb blast and you don't cover the other development story. Something that I've been working on after leaving NDTV, I've been working on books, and now I teach in a university trying to educate people on journalism while journalism jobs are not there, which is an irony, is that, we tend to stereotype people and places by reinforcing the same story again and again. So this is a very difficult thing for an editor as for a reporter, because if I'm so what happens is that we go to Chhattisgarh or we cover Chhattisgarh only when there is a Maoist strike.
Right.
Except for that. So what happens in your mind, in your visual mind, the visual of a Maoist is actually, if you close your eyes, what would be a visual of a Maoist? It would be an Adivasi, which is true and which is incorrect, hugely incorrect, because all Adivasis are not Maoists. But that is the only picture that we have given to you about Maoists. The only picture that we bring home to you about Kashmiris are the stone pelters or people, straddled with some suicide bombing or something happening, some jihadi slogans in Lal Chowk. The only visuals that you would remember coming out of Manipur are of the, people coming out and, fighting against the state. Now I haven't been able to really find a balance in that. We tried to do a story here and there, which never would have as much traction as much as a conflict within quote story would get. So this is something that I work on in terms of research and understanding the extent and scope of how we stereotype people and places by our representation of those people and places.
Yeah, in fact, that's I think a good point with the tyranny of distance is that one thing is you don't get covered at all, and then the other thing is you only get covered when a disaster happens. So that's the only reason to go to whatever is the part of the world. And then the third part is only one story from there is repeated over and over again. So in Kashmir, we will constantly get the conflict story, or even if it's not a conflict story, it's kind of the opposite of the conflict story. So we are covering it to say like, oh, look, Kashmir is not all about conflict. Here's this heartwarming story about, this person who made a fortune with his grandmother's recipe or something like that. But in Nagaland, for example, since you was talking about this issue about militants, government, and all of that, for you being out there, often out of sight of the sort of national eye, can you talk about the pressures you face as an editor, publisher there, and as a woman editor, publisher there, in being between government and militants, and both of them wanting perhaps to impose their view on your paper? Has that happened?
Yeah, the government, the militant, and you forgot to mention the society, our culture, and, where, the men, generally the men.
Men generally want to impose their view anyway.
In 1994, I was executive editor of the now defunct Nagaland Times. I started off in that paper way back in 1985. When I took over as executive editor in 1994, all the other editors, and needless to say they were all males, they would ring me up every evening and they would tell me, Mona, now you do like this. Yeah, and you got that press release. Now you do like that. So I decided, what makes these men think that they feel the need to tell me? Do they tell each other? And frankly, I don't know where the hell all these guys have disappeared. They have disappeared from the... Yeah? Okay, that is one. As far as the government is concerned, actually in Nagaland, and I'm sure the other northeastern states also, there's a very incestuous kind of relationship between the media, the government, what we call NGOs, public civil society, and because the problem is everybody knows everybody. So therein lies the problem, That is a problem, One side you are, they are your people. You understand their point of view. But at the same time, you are in a profession where your integrity is, the most important thing. Without that, you have no business to call yourself a journalist. Yeah? So these are issues that we face. When I started my own paper in 1999, my chief of bureau at Kohima had done an interview on the president of the then president of Naga Council, and those days Naga Hoho. And those days Naga Hoho was quite a big thing because since the late 80s, politicians, the government, political parties, they started sort of mainstreaming these NGOs and civil societies. And although newspapers, even our own local newspapers, forget about the national papers, and the media, the electronic media, they keep on writing Apex Naga Body. By the way, we never had Apex Naga Body. These are all NGOs, and these are all civil societies that has been formed and very generously funded by politicians and political parties also. They are not traditional bodies, and they do not have any recognition or sanction under Article 371A of the Indian Constitution. So I want to get this point very clear. And because of having written that, my tribal Hoho, Ausandan, which came up only in the early, sometime in 1991, 92, 93, that was formed. It's not traditional, it hasn't, like our village parliaments. It hasn't been there since time immemorial sort of thing. Because I had said that they are just NGOs, they banned my book. Okay. Now, that is one thing. The other thing is that, my fellow had interviewed the then president of the Naga Ho, and we published a report the next day, and the gentleman rings me up and he says, hey, please, don't, just say that you made a mistake. Tomorrow in page 1, you write that you made a mistake, and he did not say like this. So I said, no, but you said it. And I double, checked with my fellow in Kohima, and he said, no, ma'am, I was there, he said it, and like that. Then again I rang up to the gentleman and I said, yeah, but uncle, you said, he said, I know, I said it, but it doesn't look nice, now. And I had a few drinks after all. And yes, people like him, my dad and all, they were all boozing friends and all that. So I understand, he was not a very young man. And by the way, he was a former MP. Anyway, so he says, so now we have problems with our people, especially after a certain age, and after they have a couple of drinks, they want to give their interview, right? So they say something, they mean something, then they'll say, actually I said yes, but I actually mean like that. Holebi, still, it is like this. So now, what do I write? Yeah? So you see all the time, and at the end, it is always the media that has these people, they have hidden motives. So that is one thing. The other thing is, I had a very well-known person sending me an article for publication, and he had requested that his name should not be published. I read it and I said, okay, he has a right to his opinion. And the title of his article was, Sovereignty is a myth. Sovereignty is a myth, state is a reality. That was the title. I published it. I almost was killed.
Killed?
Yeah. And my house, my office was garrowed. Things were getting very bad. And of course, I am told that the Home Ministry had to inform the state government to give me protection. So I was under armed bodyguards and house guards for almost 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah. So you see, I'm just telling you briefly because I know we're running out of time and whatever. So that kind of situation, and then they put so much pressure on me through the church, through so many people, my father-in-law, everybody to say, they wanted me to reveal the name of the person. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. If the day I do that, I might as well quit as a journalist because professional confidentiality is professional confidentiality. There's no two ways about it. So these people went up to my father-in-law and said, if you are a man, you control your daughter-in-law. You know what you have to, that usual thing. Something like your
Wow.
So you see, these are the issues that we have. Then you have, I can understand my friend from Kashmir because I think every evening he's dealing with the same issues that I am dealing with.
Yeah,
that page 1, I have sent, this is the same thing, Manipur papers go off publication because they want page 1, they don't want anything to be, deleted, they want as is,
right.
Verbatim, page 1, and they write 2,000 words. Our small size, tabloid size, my small tabloid size paper cannot take that, give that much of...
That's why the new media and digital come when we can do ample. But Monalisa, let me cut you off because I also want to get to some questions from the audience. But before that, quickly, Shujaat, how, when you come under that kind of risk, when Monalisa, you have had assassination attempts too, when you come under that kind of pressure, who do you turn to? Because everybody is looking at you with suspicion. The state doesn't like what you write. The militants feel perhaps you're not espousing their point of view?
Yeah, I think that's the badge of the honor, because when state doesn't like you and the wiring groups, they also don't like you and would say that you're a collaborator, and others would say that you are a mujahid for that matter. So I think that's a good thing to happen, but at the same time it becomes very difficult because you are all the time under scrutiny, and now with this digital age and when everything is on the internet and you are not under surveillance only within the country, but you are under surveillance outside the country as well. And as she rightly said, that everybody expects that you give more coverage to them. And for that matter, government also wants you not to report certain things. And for that matter, I mean, I am the victim. 2 other newspapers in Srinagar are victim because your DAVP is banned for last 8 years. And without any reason, because the apparent reason is that you're giving coverage to the militants. I mean, the press releases and other things. But that wouldn't apply to a national newspaper which would carry an interview with Salahuddin, for that matter, or a news channel which would carry Salahuddin's rally in Muzaffarabad for 24 hours. So that doesn't apply to this. So obviously the level of suspicion and treating you as other is the lines are very clear for that matter. So, but I think, I mean, it has been a tough time, but as long as you survive, you say that you have done something. I mean, it's only a matter of time.
We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Let me open this up to a few questions.
We talk about the government, underground, the civil society, whatever. As in Nagaland, in short, we call the overground, underground, and the middle ground. I didn't even start on the Indian Army. And there are many stories about that.
Overground, underground, middle, it's like Lord of the Rings, yeah? Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Swati. I'm a student from Delhi University. Sir, my question is to you, Shujaat, sir. Sir, like you mentioned that today's media is not just about feeding the unawareness, but rather ignorance. And when the news media talks about a soldier being harassed, like we saw, but not about 8 people being killed on the same day, and when it doesn't talk about gas pipeline, water supply being blocked during the curfews in Kashmir, are we not conforming to the majority of Indians' prejudices about Kashmir completely against what media ought to be doing? Are we not, basically, we are showing some things which are actually conforming to the majority's viewpoint, and which is completely against what media ought to be doing, that is to open our viewpoints, the other side of the viewpoints.
Exactly, that's what I said, that, I mean, you tell the people the story which you want them to hear, actually, and not the story which you as a journalist has to be told to the people. So there is a serious problem as far as the media is concerned. And that's what I was saying, that the distances have not been shortened, but distances have increased over a period of time.
I think we have a question back there. I want to go front and back. I'll come to you, sir.
I'd just like to ask the panel if there's any real legitimacy to this tyranny of distance excuse. Because, say, for example, when a major Gogoi incident happens, a publication commissions a dozen-odd contributor pieces, opinion pieces, but won't send that one reporter on the ground to even trace the path that Mr. Dar took. So is it just an excuse, this tyranny of distance thing?
I think it's lack of understanding. The Chennai floods, the first 1.5 days, it did not get covered. Why? Was Chennai not flooding? It's just because someone sitting in a newsroom did not understand the importance of it. So I think newsrooms the only solution is newsrooms have to become more inclusive. We need people from all across the country, and I'm sorry to say this, but people who've grown up in those parts of the country. See, I can be a Malayali who's grown up in Delhi, so I still don't understand the ethos of Kerala, right, to a large extent. So I think we need people in our newsrooms who are grown up in different regions, and only then, and they should be in roles in a newsroom where they can dictate what becomes priority. And that's very important.
So then, Dhanya, if that newsroom did exist, would you say there would be no need for a news minute? I'm sorry, I didn't want to put you on the spot there.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Like, you can't expect a national television or a newspaper to cover everything. They still can only cover 8 to 10 to 15 stories a day. Like NDTV, for example, is perhaps the only news channel which does packages, your small stories. Nobody else does it anymore. So I don't think you can expect the national media to cover everything, but they can cover more.
Question up front.
Hi, my name is Professor Khanna from Consumer Voice magazine. My question to the gentleman from Srinagar and the lady from Nagaland. In this milieu of pressure and trying to balance different sides, what happens to the advertising revenue? Does it go up or does it come down? And does it actually influence, the real pressure is by losing money. So are people able to take away your revenues to make you fall in line or not? And has this happened in the last few years? Thank you.
Can you talk about the advertising revenue and the pressure that exerts on editorial?
See, as far as my paper is concerned, and I think almost all, I mean, they are doing slightly better because they have, they are broadsheets with color and all that. For us, we are just surviving by the skin of our teeth. We are empaneled with a DAVP, but then,
Do you have ads?
Yeah, there are. We get ads from the government, and that is after a lot of years of fighting that we are getting. And I don't get too many private ads, but yes, I do get some. So we, ours a very small kind of, you cannot, yes, and now when people ask in terms of what's your circulation, it's difficult to say because you all are thinking in terms of Times of India and, Indian Express and stuff like that. For us, it doesn't operate like that, And sometimes in some village, even if you can send one paper, it's like good enough.
It's read by many people.
Yeah, so, and then now that we are online, so we don't have that kind of, but it depends. We have papers in Nagaland, as I'm sure anywhere else, who are there for the business part of it. It's a business. And for some of us, it's our vocation, it's our life.
We have to end it, but Shujaat, do you have anything to say about the advertising? Your paper, what kind of advertising pressure do you face?
I said that. I think we already face the pressure from the government. So it's a tough kind of a situation in the sense that you don't have much private revenue coming in a place like Jammu and Kashmir for that matter. But we do manage with that also, and also you have the state government revenue. Pressures are always there, and you pay the price if you go by whatever your conscience will tell you to do. So suppose for last 1 year, in 2016 when there was this turmoil, for 6 months we had no revenue because there was neither the government revenue nor the private revenue. So you can well imagine that how difficult it is to manage the publications, and then you cannot stop the publication because people want to read something. That too in wake of the situation when the internet is down for most of the time. So it's a very tough situation. Whether it dictates us to what we have to do or not to do, that's difficult to answer. But I don't think, it certainly dictates us a position for that matter. But it's a very tough kind of a situation.
If I may just add here, there's no question of profit. It's like, every day you're living day by, one day to the other. And then, sometimes you get little payment for your advertisements from the government, whatever. It all goes on buying diesel because half the time there's no electricity. So all the money you earn, it goes on stuff like that. And now you earn a little bit, you save a little bit. Few of us, we didn't get our salary. We are not going to get our salary for some time because we invested everything taking a loan from the bank to buy a generator because the generators get spoiled so fast because of the... So these are problems we are dealing with, So when people talk in terms of circulation and, revenue and all that, like...
Yeah, like we have to deal with my diesel generator first.
Yeah, at the back of my mind, I said, man, come to the Northeast and get real, man.
On that note, get real. I think it's a good note to end this panel. Thank you very much to everybody.